You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and let's start today with a breaking case out of Tennessee. It all started when an adorable 7-month-old baby girl was found strapped in a car seat on a random driveway in rural Tigret, Tennessee. Now that happened 6 days ago. Tigret is about 80 miles north of Memphis, and it was roughly around 3 p.m. A 911 call was made, and the child was taken to the hospital and checked out and then placed in the state's care. The baby girl is fine, but the mystery deepened tragically when a few hours later, another 911 call was placed. This time, a man was searching the home of 38-year-old Courtney Rose. She's the baby's grandma, and the man was wandering around the house with a flashlight looking for Courtney and Courtney's daughter, 20-year-old Adriana Williams. Okay, I'm working on context clues here, but I believe Courtney and Adriana and the 7-month-old baby girl all live in the same house. Now, I'd play the portion of the 911 call that's been released where the man is searching the house for Courtney and Adriana, but it is so grainy. In fact, you can't even really understand the man. I just don't ever want you guys to think that I'm not bringing you everything that is out there. Now, it's important here to understand that the baby was dropped off in Tigret and Courtney's house is in Tiptonville. That's a very rural and wooded area with a population of about 3,500 people. Now, the two areas are 40 miles apart. So it took a moment for law enforcement to connect the guy searching the house with the dropped-off baby in the driveway. What we were initially told was that a mid-sized SUV or minivan had pulled up to the random driveway and placed the baby girl strapped in the car seat on the ground and then drove away, and that law enforcement was working to identify the baby and who she belonged to. Then that second 911 call happened, and we were later told the man was searching the house with a flashlight after he found 2 vehicles abandoned in a remote area. Again, context clues. I'm assuming the vehicles belong to members of the household because why would the person then go looking for them for it's not a random reason that person shows up at the house with a flashlight. Now, eventually, on Wednesday, so one day after the baby was found, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation clarified they had found 4 people connected to the abandoned baby, and those 4 people were dead in Tiptonville. When I took the podcast to production, the TBI had yet to say how the 4 were killed, but they did say the bodies were discovered near each other in a wooded area. The 4 victims are the baby's mother, Adriana, and the baby's father, 21-year-old James Matthew Wilson, and the grandma, Courtney, and the baby's uncle, 15-year-old Braden Williams, who was also Adriana's little brother. Now, by Thursday, the TBI had named a suspect, 28-year-old Austin Drummond. All right, what's his connection to the 4 dead family members and the abandoned baby? It's being reported that Austin is dating or had very recently dated Caitlin. That's Courtney's daughter and Adriana and Braden's half-sister. Yes, you guys, it's very confusing and the reporting is all over the place. I am deeply disturbed by journalists who think that they're being clear about this. Okay, so I'm going to go through it one more time. I want to make sure we have it right here. We have Courtney, we have daughter Adriana, son Braden, and Adriana's baby daddy, James Matthew. Those 4 are all dead in the wooded area. We have Caitlin, that's Courtney's daughter, which also makes her Braden and Adriana's half-sister, dating the named suspect, Austin Drummond. Now, Caitlin is not hurt. Austin is on the run, and the 4 others are dead. All right, so back to Austin. What's up with Austin Drummond? Well, on Saturday, police found Austin's 2016 Audi A3 that was abandoned kind of in a wooded area, but it's still around houses. It was near the end of a dead-end road in Jackson, Tennessee. Jackson is 70 miles southeast of Tiptonville, which is where the 4 bodies were found. Now, Jackson police are saying the car appears to have been lived in, so they believe he might be in the area still. Like, where else is he going to go? This is kind of his house on wheels. Police were encouraging residents to lock their doors because he is considered armed and dangerous. Okay, remember how I said it has not been reported how they died? Well, armed is most likely a gun. It could be a knife, but most likely a gun. And he is extremely dangerous because he has a violent past. Austin previously spent years in prison for robbing a convenience store as a 16-year-old kid. He was tried as an adult in that case, and he was found guilty. During that robbery, Austin pointed a pistol at the gas station store worker and ordered the cash register to be opened. He ran away with just $44. That was back in 2013. At his parole hearing in 2020, he told the board that he was on Xanax during the robbery and that it wasn't a pistol, it was just a BB gun. In that 2020 parole hearing, he was denied parole. The whole case was all muddied up when, following the conviction of the 2013 robbery, when he was just 16 years old and he robbed those $44 from the convenience store, well, during the conviction of that, Austin threatened to go after the jurors who convicted him. This all happened during a jailhouse phone call with his father. Because he did that added 13 counts of retaliation to his charges. That made his total sentence 13 years. And that prison time ended in September of 2024. So, he's been out since then and apparently dating Caitlin. During his prison sentence, he had more than 24 disciplinary issues. They included possession of a deadly weapon, assault, refusing a drug test, and gang activity. Austin always contended he was almost beaten to death in prison, so the possession of the deadly weapon, that disciplinary action, well, it was simply so he could protect himself. TBI is confident they have their suspect. They have charged him with 4 counts of first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping, and firearm charges. Again, it makes me think the 4 died of gunshot wounds. Now, the TBI just needs to find him. TBI is saying they believe that Austin was the one who dropped off the baby. After the white Audi was found, TBI conducted a raid at an apartment complex where they believed Austin to possibly be staying. He was not found there, but due to the raid, the TBI began looking for an older pickup truck. That truck has since been located. Again, there is no Austin. And at the time I took this to recording, there was no Austin. TBI is also saying that the 4 were killed the day before the baby was dropped off. Now, family of Caitlin have been vocal on Facebook about Austin and what a great guy he is, that he has been nothing but sweet to the children in their family. This has caused so much back and forth on social media. And Caitlin, her last name is Speed, Caitlin Speed. She's the girlfriend, remember? Well, she shut down her social media, allegedly due to threats she was receiving. I will say this. Austin looks healthy and happy in the pictures with Caitlin. And so the whole thing is very confusing. It makes me ask the question, did Caitlin and Courtney, okay, that's her mother, did Caitlin and Courtney have beef? And then Austin stepped in? Did Caitlin have beef with her step siblings? I don't know. I don't know why Austin would step in or even be a part of killing these 4 people. Now, the theories are running rampant online. If I was to guess, by the time you are listening to this, Austin will have been captured, and I will have an update for you on Thursday. Until then, let me know what you think in the comments. Now, I promised you last episode that I would be bringing you the verdict in the trial of James Craig. He's the husband who was accused of poisoning his wife with her protein shakes. Now, as I assembled my thoughts on this case, I just kept revisiting Angela, the 43-year-old mother of 6, the wife who had dedicated 23 years of herself to marriage and motherhood, the woman who was a community member who served as a choir director in her local area for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I thought about how there are multiple ways to kill someone. Clearly, we talk about them twice a week here, and most of those ways are brutal and relatively quick. But in this case, the abuse took weeks. Poisoning that inflicted 2 weeks of extreme discomfort and pain, numerous doctor's visits, and no relief or answers. The torture finally ending in Angela's hospital room with a final lethal dose administered through her IV by her husband, James Craig. Now, I thought about how nurses aren't supposed to be concerned about a husband visiting his wife in the hospital, how they should be able to leave the room with the assurance that James Craig isn't there to harm his wife, Angela. And I finally landed on those 6 children, now left without a mother on this earth and without a father because he will likely never leave prison again. So let's get into it. Angela had been complaining of headaches and dizziness for weeks. The pain had led her to visit the ER 3 times in just a 10-day span. Yet, doctors were stumped. During her first visit to the ER, Angela texted James, simply writing, "I feel drugged." He had responded asking what she had taken. She wrote back that the only thing that she had consumed that morning was her protein shake right before her workout. Now, during the 3rd ER visit, Angela suffered a seizure so severe she became unresponsive. She was quickly transferred to the ICU, and 3 days later, she was pronounced brain dead. That was March 18th, 2 years ago, in 2023. Just 3 days prior to her death, police received their first indication that James Craig might be up to no good. See, James's dental partner, his name is Ryan Redfern. Well, he was picking up the extra work at the dental office. James was at the hospital with his wife, and of course, a skilled office staff would not be alerting James of anything weird or anything that needed his attention. But when the office manager saw that a package of potassium cyanide had been delivered to James Craig at the dental office, she was concerned. So she called Ryan, the dental partner. A few hours later, when Ryan arrived at the hospital to comfort James, he was feeling a little bit edgy and concerned. At one point, he asked to speak with a nurse privately. Ryan explained about the cyanide that had been delivered to the office, and after a few minutes, Ryan and the nurse concluded there would be no justifiable reason that James should be ordering this cyanide. The nurse? Well, she called law enforcement, and James's plot to kill his wife began to unravel. Later that night, while Angela lay in a coma, James called Ryan, and it was a complicated phone call. Ryan boldly admitted he knew about the package, and James clumsily tried to fabricate a story about how it was just some big mistake, that the package was delivered to the dental office and it was all wrong. And then that story morphed into James saying, all right, the real truth is that Angela had asked him to buy the cyanide. He claimed to Ryan that Angela wanted to end her life. Ryan cut him off and ended the conversation by saying, stop talking and call a lawyer. Guess what? James didn't stop talking. In fact, he sent a lengthy text to Ryan, begging him to show love in his heart and not speak with law enforcement anymore. In that lengthy text, he even used his children as leverage, explaining how horrible it has been for them and that Ryan was just making it worse by sharing information with office staff and with law enforcement. Now, after Angela's death, James did 2 things. He worked hard to convince law enforcement that his wife was depressed and suicidal. He was also cooperative. He gave law enforcement his phone and his passcode. He told them where to find his laptop and how to access that laptop. When detectives searched his home, they found the protein powder, the last water bottle that Angela used, and 2 Ziploc bags with powder that weren't labeled. The police gathered so much evidence that the arrest affidavit in this case was 52 pages long. Let me just give you some highlights. James had searched for terms like, how many grams of pure arsenic will kill a human? And is arsenic detectable in an autopsy? James also searched for chemical suppliers of the arsenic. And then there was the affair. That same laptop was loaded with sexually explicit email exchanges between James and a woman named Karen Kane. Karen, who's an orthodontist, met James at a medical conference. She was newly divorced, and James was telling her he was newly separated and close to divorce. The relationship hadn't been lengthy, just a few weeks, but it had accelerated quickly. James was arrested in the early morning hours of March 19th. Angela had not even been dead 24 hours. I want to pause here. We need to congratulate law enforcement here. Not only did they work fast, but they worked with extreme efficiency, and they were so thorough. To put together a 52-page arrest affidavit, a murder warrant, in the amount of time that they did is very, very A-plus level work. They really did their job. Now, back to the story. James was charged with first-degree murder. The months leading up to the trial that ended last week, well, they were tumultuous. James cycled through a carousel of lawyers. One of his high-profile lawyers quit on him, citing professional ethics rules. After that whole debacle, James was assigned counsel. But one of those assigned lawyers, well, he got himself in trouble with the law on weapons charges. That left James with just one assigned lawyer. Now, 3 other lawyers eventually joined the high-profile case, and then there was the whole jailhouse informant issue. See, James was in jail awaiting trial, and this informant said he received a letter from James asking him to kill the lead detective, Bobby Olson, all of this in exchange for money. James allegedly then wrote letters to the informant's ex-wife asking her to fabricate evidence that would make it look like Angela was suicidal. Now, after all of this was fleshed out, no physical harm was done to the detective. But James, well, he had additional charges added to his first-degree murder charge. He was now facing solicitation to commit first-degree murder, solicitation to commit perjury, and tampering with evidence. When the trial finally started in mid-July, the prosecution's opening statements held really no surprises. They basically said everything the 52-page murder warrant laid out. He killed his wife with arsenic in protein shakes, but they did explain that they believe James had administered the final poisonous dose in Angela's IV during her last visit to the hospital. They explained James had some serious financial troubles, one bankruptcy already under his belt and another bankruptcy looming. They said he had a new love interest, and they contended he had asked his children to destroy evidence. Now, the defense in turn said that the prosecution's case was built on assumptions and that the jury would learn that James wasn't in financial crisis and that the marriage was loving but complicated. Now, the defense also carried forward the suicide plot, saying Angela was deeply stressed due to her religious duties and keeping up community appearances. They also threw it out there, asking the jury to not focus on their dislike for James because, to be honest, he's kind of not likable. They asked instead for the jury to focus on the burden of proof. Well, after the evidence and the testimonies about the ordering of the cyanide, James and Angela's oldest daughter took the stand. She testified that her mother was not suicidal, that they were making plans to remodel a part of the home, and that she loved being a mom. She also testified that she had begged her dad to have an autopsy performed on her mother so that they could at least figure out what had caused her death. She said her father told her that he didn't want to satisfy the doctor's morbid curiosity, and that really, if they couldn't figure it out while she was alive, why figure it out after she's dead? Then another daughter testified that protein shakes were common in the home. She also testified that months after her father's arrest, her father had called her from jail and asked that she bail out a fellow inmate. Yeah, that inmate? Well, he's the jailhouse informant inmate. She said he even lied to her and said the fellow inmate was a cousin and that she would be helping family if she bailed the guy out. She told the jury she didn't recognize the guy's name as family. She then told the jury when she drove to jail to bail out her so-called cousin, she was handed pieces of printer paper with writing on them that were taped together. She said that letter was in her father's handwriting, and in it he asked her to create a fake piece of evidence, a deep fake video of Angela saying she asked James to order the chemicals. Now, this letter seemed to include detailed step-by-step instructions of how to do it, including buying a cheap laptop that would later be destroyed and then making transactions from the dark web to help aid in this creation of this suicide plot. The daughter said the letter stressed the importance of the metadata for the deepfake to show that it was created on February 27th of 2023. That was just weeks before the murder. Now, James told her to call it the Memory Project and laid out code words to use to discuss the Memory Project. Well, the prosecution then went on to show texts between Angela and James. They started clear back in 2022. Those texts accused James of having an affair with a woman who really wasn't named in the texts. And of course, they then showed the texts of the month-long emotional affair with Karen. That was the orthodontist that was met at the medical conference. Okay, back to Ryan. Remember the business partner who blew the lid off this whole thing? Well, when he took the stand and explained that indeed James was in serious financial crisis, he also testified that the whole finding of the cyanide and the alerting the hospital staff to the potential poisoning, well, he said it was all true. Everything that was in that 52-page murder warrant was 100% true. When Karen finally took the stand, she explained the affair and that she should have noticed the red flags in their messages. She also said that James had written her a song titled Enough, and that he had sent that to her during the poisoning window, meaning James is poisoning his wife on one side and writing love songs to another woman at the same time that are claiming that she is enough for him when his own wife wasn't enough for him. All right. Nearly 2 days of testimony were spent on an iPhone note that James had recorded shortly before his phone was seized by detectives. Now, I want you to remember, I said he was very cooperative with handing over his phone and passcode. This could be why. This 4-page note detailed how Angela was wanting to kill herself and that he had found the eye drops that she was poisoning herself with. In the iPhone note, he explains how his wife had asked him to, quote, finish the job. And that was why he used the syringe filled with poison and injected that poison into her IV while she was in the hospital. Now, when the prosecution rested their case, they had called almost 50 witnesses. The defense? Well, they rested without calling a single witness. After 10 days of testimony and jury deliberation, the jury found James Craig guilty of all the counts he was facing. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing portion, James and Angela's oldest daughter delivered you guys, it was so painful, a painful impact statement where she told her father the following: I was supposed to be able to trust my dad. He was supposed to be my hero, and instead, he'll forever be the villain in my book. Well, while she was delivering her remarks, James appeared to shake with the tears he was shedding. Now, James' second child, a son named Tolliver, said that even though he and his mother weren't always the best of friends, that 2 weeks after his mother died, he set an alarm on his phone for 10 p.m., and that alarm sounds every night. That alarm is meant to remind him of the time his mother died on March 18th of 2023. Now, James could have given remarks during the sentencing portion of his trial, but he declined to speak. The younger children of the 6 kids had been cared for by families since the death of Angela and since the arrest of James. Now, one thing I always look for in researching cases is what is written in the victim's obituary. Interestingly, in Angela's obituary, it's what isn't written that has me raising an eyebrow. There is not a standard line about who she has left behind. You know, something like this. Angela is survived by her husband, James, and their 6 children, and then it would list the 6 kids. All of that's missing from the obituary. But when it does mention the 6 children, this is the wording. Angela brought 6 beautiful children into the world. Not Angela and James brought 6 beautiful children into the world. Not Angela and James created a family of 6 children. Nothing like that. Angela brought 6 beautiful children into the world. Now, this obituary was published just days after her death and days after James's arrest. This absence of the wording makes me believe that Angela's family, specifically her sister, that they knew all along James was guilty of her murder. Now, I know several of you have followed this case. Tell me what you think in the comments. And much like our first story today, the suspect in the stabbing deaths of the Devil's Den murder in Arkansas was arrested last week while getting his hair cut. And he was arrested after I took the podcast to production. You know how I said I'm kind of worried that Austin's going to be arrested after I take the podcast to production? Well, that's what happened in the Devil's Den murder in Arkansas. His name, 28-year-old James Andrew McGann. And he was arrested on July 30th for the deaths of 43-year-old Clinton Brink and his wife, 41-year-old Kristen Brink. I got to stop here. Just kind of point out, have you guys noticed that every story has a James in it today? And in two of the stories, James is the bad guy. I talk all the time about how these crime cases have these same things woven through it. It happened again with this episode. It's weird, I know, but it happens all the time. So in this story, James is a teacher. He was licensed in Texas and in Oklahoma and Arkansas, and he bounced from school district to school district. In Texas, he was accused of inappropriate behavior like tickling young girls and giving them treats while saying phrases like, "I wish you could be my girlfriend." Now, after those accusations happened in Texas, James was put on administrative leave. He then transferred to 2 different school districts in Oklahoma, where he also struggled with inappropriate behavior. He left his final district in Oklahoma at the end of the school year and had accepted the teaching position in Arkansas, but had yet to step foot in a classroom. Now, we've learned from authorities that they believe James approached Clinton and Kristen and their 2 daughters, ages 7 and 9, while they were hiking on the popular trail called Devil's Den. They believe that James began stabbing Clinton and that Kristen grabbed the girls and ran them down the trail, telling them to keep running to safety. James then caught up with Kristen when she turned back to help her husband and allegedly stabbed her to death as well. Now, the girls were not physically harmed in the attack. Police believe that James had no connection to the Brinks. Now, the stylist from the barber shop has granted an interview to a local TV affiliate. Let me play what she had to say about the arrest of James on the 30th.
I noticed that his demeanor was more of reserved, so I didn't really talk to him. I'd be afraid that if I did, he would have kind of catched on or something. So I just went on with the haircut. It's been overwhelming. I've never been in a situation like this, so I just couldn't stop thinking about the little girls that saw his face. He's pretty scary, dark sunken eyes, but it feels like it's too much. I could only imagine the family, the Brink family, what they're going through.
You guys, I couldn't agree more with her. His eyes are so vacant, especially in his booking photo. Now, it is reported he was cooperative with authorities, and it has been reported that he admitted to committing the murders during his post-arrest interview. Arkansas State Police Director Mike Hager confirmed in a press briefing that they have DNA evidence that will prove that James was the man who killed Clinton and Kristen. Apparently, he left his own blood at the scene, and blood was found in his black Kia. Now, knives were also seized, and they're now being tested to determine if they are the murder weapons. Authorities are leaving the death penalty on the table, and I'm guessing it... Thanks, sweetheart. For all those listening, that was Q shaking her head. So I'll start that over. Authorities are leaving the death penalty on the table. I'm guessing it will be used to secure a guilty plea deal. And I need you guys to think this one through. That will show some mercy for the children, the daughters, ages 7 and 9. If those 2 little girls are forced to testify about the events of the day of the murders, it will be heartbreaking for them. Now, I'm grateful that the manhunt ended as quickly as it did. Please, you guys, send all those good vibes to the 2 little girls. Now to comments from last week's episode. You guys were nothing short of outraged about little KJ, who was left in the back seat of the transporter's car. I knew that's how you were going to respond. I can't name everybody, but Dragonfly Lady and Jordan and Becky and Katie and so many more, they demanded justice for KJ. I do have an update to that case. On Friday, Keela Strandford, she's a 54-year-old contract transport worker employed by Covenant Services in Alabama. Well, she was arrested and charged with a felony of leaving a child in a vehicle. She has bonded out of the Jefferson County Jail. Now, it's not the murder charge you were all hoping for, but it is something. She could spend up to 20 years in prison if she is convicted. To other stories, I had some people who live in the tarantula areas say they are terrified now because I was listing the 14 states where there's going to be a mass amount of tarantulas, a horde of tarantulas out during mating season, which started a couple days ago, by the way. If you guys have pictures of those, please send them to me because I think it would be fascinating to see these tarantulas moving about in these little mobs. And then Yang on YouTube said, "Not me, paralyzed in my bed in Texas right now." And finally, from Thursday's episode, Misty asked the question we all wanted to know the answer to. Did they allow the man who got violent on the Australian plane to finally use the bathroom? I have no idea. Why don't journalists ask those kind of questions, the ones we really want to know about? All right, you guys, that's your Monday episode of Rise and Crime. Thanks for being here. Please share this episode with a friend or one of your favorite episodes, maybe one of the crime cases that you were so drawn into. I would love for others to join us here on this shared experience. Please keep sending me the cases that you want me to talk about and the ones that are spiking your interest. And of course, we always love 5-star reviews and positive comments here at Oh No Media. Please like and follow all of us on our social media accounts or on YouTube or on podcasts. Subscribe, do all the good stuff. And the 3 Oh No Media podcasts are Rise and Crime, Murder with My Husband, and Into the Dark. And I did just have a thought. I do believe Peyton and Garrett just released new merch and I believe a coloring book on their Oh No Media website. If you guys follow Peyton, you know that for her mental health, she colors and such cute pages. So I have seen the coloring book. It's so cute, you guys. So if you want it, head on over to ohnomedia.com. All right, join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.